Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I do hope that you're safe. I hope that you are observing the social distancing. I hope that you and your family and all of your family, wherever they may be, are safe. Thankfully, my wife and I are still doing just fine. I appreciate all of the private messages asking about our health, offering of prayers, and what have you. It truly means a lot to us, and I want you to know how much we appreciate that. We are, hopefully, and as I've said before, we're beginning to see some really, really positive signs out there. The president has said that hopes the society and business can start opening up again very soon. We hope that's not premature, obviously. I keep going back to the fact that no matter how bad this is, and once again, I have never appreciated how serious this situation is, but there's still more people that die with the flu than they die with this. Now, because this is a new strain of a virus, then it has more potential, all right? But so far, what we are seeing is not that rate of mortality. That's the good side. The bad side is people are still dying. People are still dying from the flu. And that's always an extremely, extremely sad situation. Well, we are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse. We have been looking over the last few videos at Jesus' statement, "Verily I say unto you, this generation will by no means pass until all of these things are fulfilled." Well, needless to say, this passage has given scholars and laymen alike absolute fits over the centuries. People have resorted to every kind of manipulation, every kind of theological gymnastics that you can possibly imagine. It has been suggested, well, the word Ghania, and by the way, it's not just simply Ghania, it's this generation, as Jesus expressed it. So he was pointing to something very specific. It was not a generation will not pass until, even though one, if he took that term, if he had Jesus speak on anatherosly, it would still force it to be a reference to a time frame. But anyway, some people have said, well, Ghania means race of people, and that's the Jews. Well, interestingly enough, that argument has really begun losing its favor and its standing over the last 40, 50 years. Even many dispensationalists who once used to rely on this argument to have Matthew 24:34 say, pardon me, the Jewish people will not pass away until all of these things pass, they realize that's a fatal argument. Because that means at the time of the parousia, Matthew 24:29-31, at that time, the Jewish race ceases to exist. This generation, i.e. the Jewish race, will not pass away until what? The parousia. Well, that kind of destroys dispensationalism. And therefore, dispensationalists have by and large started abandoning that argument. Secondly, some attempts, as I have shared with you, some people say, well, this generation means procreation. It means making babies. And thus they have Jesus saying, baby making will not pass away until the parousia. And so they have, in their imaginary theology, they have procreation ending at the day of the Lord. Well, Isaiah 65 refutes that. In the new creation, it talks about babies in the new creation. And not only that, other passages as well. And by the way, Sam Frost, in his book, Exegetical Essays on the Resurrection, has a really fantastic study demonstrating and proving that in the Old Testament predictions of the new creation, there is absolute positive proof of continued life, continued procreation. You can order a copy of this book from my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com. And, his exegesis in this book is absolutely fantastic as compared and opposed to his later books, which are not exegetical by any stretch of the imagination. So that argument, baby making will end at the day of the Lord, really has no linguistic support. And remember, it's this generation. So Jesus has to be speaking of some kind of very specific, quote, baby making. Really? What very specific kind of baby making might be in view? Well, then it is argued, well, this generation means a given kind of people. And by that it's meant the wicked. Well, once again, Isaiah 65 knocks that down because in the new creation, by the way, in that new creation that is described in Isaiah 65, it only comes at the time when Israel is destroyed. Isaiah 65, verse 15, the Lord God will slay you and call his people by a new name. Verse 17, for behold, I create new heaven and new earth. So here is the new creation that would only come when Israel, Old Covenant Israel, was destroyed. What would be in that new creation? Sinners. So guess what? The idea that this generation, and oh, by the way, Isaiah 66 teaches the same thing. Be sure to be watching this Friday when I'll talk about that. So the idea that this generation means a certain kind of people falls by the wayside as well. What kind of people? This generation. Now, in order for that, quote, definition to be sustained, you would have to have Jesus in the context. In the context of Matthew chapter 24, actually talking about this kind of people. But you see, he's answering the question not about the kind of people. He's answering the question not about baby making, but he's answering the question, when shall these things be? And in all of the previous discussion, he says, when you see, when, time word, when you see. And he talks about in those days. And he talks about at that time. And he talks about immediately after the tribulation. You see, the focus in Jesus' entire previous discussion leading up to verse 34 is on time. Verse 32 and 33, remember? What did he say? Remember the parable of the fig tree? How that when it puts forth its leaves and they turn green, you know that summer is nigh. This is a discussion not about baby making, and it's not about a certain kind of people. It's talking about time. So likewise you, when, time word, when you see all of these things come to pass, then know that it, that is he, that's the parousia, is near, nigh, even at the door. Time reference. Now watch this. Verily I say unto you. Now this is taken from the little Greek term, amin, lego, humin. It's used 95 times in the New Testament. When that term, verily I say unto you, is used, it calls attention to what is about to be said that will emphasize what has just been said. Let me say that again. When the term, amin, lego humin, verily I say unto you, or truly, truly I say unto you, when that term is used, it calls attention to what is about to be said that emphasizes what has just been said. That means that verse 34 is emphasizing verse 32 and 33. Well, does verse 32 and verse 33 have a word to say about baby making? Procreation? Does verse 32 and verse 33 have one word to say about this kind of people? Absolutely not. Oh, pardon me. Absolutely not. And thus, in order to get this generation refer to procreation or the Jews or this kind of wicked people, which has not been discussed, you have to impose that onto the verse 34. It's not in the verse. And it's not even in the discussion previously. Pardon me. All of this evidence leads us inexorably, irrefutably, to the conclusion that when Jesus said this generation, he was using it in the temporal sense. That all lexicons, almost without exception, say when the term this generation is used, it refers to all of the people living at a given time. And what that means is that the first century generation, all the people living when Jesus spoke those things, would not pass away until the Lord came. And that destroys futurism. And we're going to compare Matthew 24:34 to Matthew 16:27 and 28 to drive that home on the flip side. So I'll see you there.